Okay, I just want to tell you a little bit about BGSF in case you don't know about us. And we do have these webinars throughout the year. But we are one of the fastest growing publicly traded workforce solution firms in the United States. The company was actually created in 2007, formerly BG Staffing, Inc. And now we operate through 91 locations across 46 states, DC, and Canada. So within our professional division, we have 10 specialized brands nationwide, and those are specific to accounting and finance, HR, legal and administrative, information technology, and cybersecurity. And so through all those disciplines, we provide our clients with project consulting, managed services, staff augmentation, direct hire, and executive search services. And now about our speaker today. We are thrilled to have Jeff Servideo. And Jeff is with Momentum Solutions. 12 years ago, Jeff co-founded this company, which was acquired by BGSF in 2021. He is a very experienced management consulting professional with 25 years of system integration, business process reengineering, implementation, and custom application experience, along with 20 years of administrative and international accounting and systems experience. So Jeff's strong business background and his experience with HCM and CRM, it brings a unique perspective on how systems integrate and their dependencies. Jeff leads many organizations through strategy, requirements, and design sessions to achieve business goals, including package selection projects, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Jeff lives in the Austin, Texas area. So I am going to now welcome Jeff and turn this over to you. And we thank you so much, Jeff. And I'll go off camera.
Thank you, Kay. What a great introduction. I didn't realize it did all those things. No, just kidding. Welcome, everyone. Glad you could join us today. Hope everyone's well. Hope you're having lunch, maybe relaxing. So hopefully you can sit back and relax, and we'll take the next hour here to discuss software selection. Again, we provided the name of puzzle and software selection because there's just so many pieces to the process, and everyone's puzzle is a little bit different. What it looks like, the shapes of the pieces, the colors, the size of the entire puzzle, all of that's a little bit different for every organization, but there are some tried and true practices to kind of help frame what that puzzle is going to look like. And so we hope to put some of those puzzle pieces together today, maybe build the outline or the border of that puzzle to help you guys think about some of the things that go into it if you're going to take this journey of software selection, or if you're in the middle of it, maybe validate what you're doing today. The need for software and upgrading software, of course, has been around since the beginning of software. Today, we want to focus specifically on enterprise resource planning software, or better known as ERP, for this discussion, which brings us to the very first polling question. And that polling question is, where is your company in the life of your ERP system today? And the polling questions are going to work where we basically give you about a minute to answer those. And we'll provide the results of those a little bit later in the presentation so you can see what's happening. And we're just simply asking you guys just to select one. Are you planning to do this in the near future? Have you already done it or already selected to do this and you're in the middle of it? Or are you sticking with your current system? This is just to kind of give us an idea of who's attending, what you guys are into, and what's going on. So I think maybe another 30 seconds there to get that answered.
Yep, Jeff, and I was just going to let you know, Emily, who is our person behind the curtain there, she's going to give us the answers really quickly right after the poll closes. It'll come up.
Okay, great. Okay, looks like that is done. And there's the results. Okay, great. We'll move on then. So what we're looking at here today is, again, the ERP. And what we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years are the aging of the current ERPs or the ERPs that were created 25 to 35 years ago. Those ERPs are starting to somewhat age out. And with the new technology of cloud and all of the different things that go into that, software vendors are moving towards cloud offerings. And in that same time period, that 5 to 10 years, those cloud offerings have started to mature. They're starting to catch up to the 35 years of experience that the other systems had. So the functionality is more robust now. It's really ready for mid-sized to large companies to really implement those. And so current software providers are continuing to provide updates to their current software while they're developing and trying to provide a path forward to their cloud version. This has presented somewhat of a unique opportunity for customers, organizations to evaluate different offerings. If you've kind of bought something 20, 25 years ago, you kind of stay with that software and you're trying to make it work, you're upgrading, you continue to go. But now if they are saying, okay, we need you to move to the cloud, okay, I can take this opportunity to look at what else is out there. And how do you do that? Since ERPs touch every part of your business, there's many factors that need to be considered, that need to be discussed, that need to be reviewed. And so what we want to do today is focus on 3 of those major areas when considering selecting a new ERP. The first one is, what are the real reasons that we're actually even talking about this? Why are we looking for a new software? Is there really a need? If so, what are those drivers? What are the expected outcomes if I do go to a new ERP? Well, so we'll talk about what we've seen as common reasons from our experience helping organizations go through this process. Then we'll take a look at some leading practices, maybe some lessons learned when considering when and how to evaluate the ERP system. We believe we have some tried and true practices that we've implemented that have been very consistent and beneficial and advantageous to our customers. Then once the decision is made, what do we do? How do we go about actually selecting that software? What are the steps behind that that will help us drive the process to select the best software for us? So jumping into those reasons companies are looking for a new ERP. And when we talk about ERP, we're really talking about 3 or 4 different major stacks of software. We're talking about HCM, human capital management. We're talking about financial software, supply chain, and even CRM, customer relational management. Each one of those has particular evaluations that are distinct to each one of those stacks. And at the same time, they have things that are very similar. So some of those reasons that we've seen over the years are many organizations have what we call their favorite ERP, which happens to be Excel. We found this in so many customers. It's really quite comical that people have ERPs, but they end up using Excel as really their de facto ERP. And that could be based on many different things. Some of it is just a lack of training on the current system. People have gone, people have left, they took some of that knowledge with them, and they're not aware of what's actually available in that particular system. And so what do people do? They use Excel or they use something else outside of the ERP to manage, manipulate, calculate data. And then the ERP is nothing more than storing those results. It's also the older systems do have limitations, and those limitations, you have to deal with that one way or another. And a lot of times it goes into Excel. So we see a lot of this quite often where Excel does a pretty good job of doing most things, but it's not manageable. It's not scalable as companies are trying to grow, expand. And so we see that as a major issue in some of our customers. Sometimes the support of the current system is costly. You have servers, equipment, it takes people, time, effort, all of that is a lot of cost. And so customers are looking to reduce that cost. Many times the older software is written in older languages, in code. And so those employees don't want to work with older code, they want to work on newer. And so it's hard to keep people around to do the support. And so it ends up requiring kind of a rare skill set to maintain these older technologies. It can be complex to support. Lots of code, customizations, integrations over the years, institutional knowledge that's there by only a few key people. So it ends up being kind of complex. And at the same time, depending on how large your organization is, it could take a lot of people on a day-to-day just to keep it going. So there's some complexity, takes some time, and then just wanting to simplify maybe your topography of all the different systems you have. You have an ERP, and then maybe you have 10 other systems that feed into it because that ERP can't do what you want it to do. So we want to simplify that. Another one would be little support from your current ERP vendor. As we stated before, the ERP vendors are moving to the cloud. They're getting away from their older technology, and those older versions just aren't supported anymore. And so you don't have much support from the ERP vendor. That's making you increase your internal support, or consultants come in and support. And so that's increasing that need. And so just that little bit of support is just not there. Software companies in that same vein are walking somewhat of a tightrope in that they don't want to lose their current customers that aren't ready to go to the cloud, but at the same time, they want to move people to the cloud. They don't want to maintain all these different systems. And so there's kind of a give and take as they try to get people over to the cloud. Another one would be business has evolved. You're now offering newer services. You're offering new manufacturing items, whatever the case may be. You've evolved, you've pivoted over the last year. Maybe you've acquired different companies, and now we've got to integrate them. And the way that you were configured before 5, 10, 15, 25 years ago just doesn't fit what we have today. So we're kind of cramming new services, offerings, business processes into an old configuration, and it's just not manageable at this point anymore. And so that's a major driver. If you expand into other countries, certain software just doesn't support that. So we need to get something that supports our growth, our planning, where we want to go. Of course, process improvement. Some of the older software just doesn't support the automation that can be done today. So there's a lot of manual processes. There's a lot of paper. There's a lot of touches within a process that you want to automate, that you want to streamline through those processes. So a few more here: reporting capabilities. Some of the older systems, it takes a lot of technical know-how to create reports. If you want to slice and dice data, it's really hard. You got to put in a support ticket to your tech team, or there's one person that knows how to write reports, and you got to get on their to-do list and get those things done. The reporting capabilities in some of the newer software was more user-enabled. And so we want to go to that. We want to see real-time data. We want to see all of the pretty visualizations that can be provided now. And so that's a big driving factor, so that decisions within the business can be made much quicker than they could before. Improve financial controls. So if you're a SOX, publicly traded company, you've got SOX controls. There's audit trails, separation of duties, all these different types of things that you could do in the older systems. It takes some work. It's not always inherent in those systems. And the newer systems are building all of that in there, so that when you do report to your internal audit, external audit, those types of reporting are all there in the system delivered. And it's a much easier process than some of the processes I've seen over the years of trying to compile all of that data and get it into a format that the auditors can read and understand. course, leveraging the cloud efficiencies, the hosting, the care and feeding of the systems is all on the vendor of the software to provide all of that. And of course, they provide, depending on the software, 2, 4 months, 6 months, once a quarter, whatever their cadence is, they provide the system updates, new capabilities, new enhancements more often than some of the older on-premise software where you'd have to do 3, 6, 9 month upgrade to take advantage of some of those things. So that's some of the advantages in the cloud that can be leveraged. And then a couple more mobile capabilities. A lot of the software tries to do some of those mobile functionality. The newer software, it's just built in, it's already inherent. It's already has software that's form factoring. No matter which type of device you have, it's going to work. You can perform any transaction mobily. We all know how important that is today. And then security, having security and not worrying about someone breaking into your system or your environment, your infrastructure, that's all been outsourced to the software vendor and their cloud servicing, whether it's in Azure, Oracle Cloud, Google, all of the different ones that are out there, Amazon. So, and then of course the application layer as well. So those are some of the main reasons or major reasons that we've seen as we've consulted with our customers of why they would be looking for looking for a new ERP software. Which brings us to our second poll question. We'd like to hear what would be your top reason for your company to entertain a new ERP. We've got a few options there. You're very manual using Excel, like we said, or older technology doesn't meet your needs. Maybe your current system is no longer supported, or you're really looking for mobility, cloud efficiencies, outsourcing the care and management of those things. So I think maybe 30 seconds for that.
And Jeff, you're welcome to move on to the next slide and keep talking.
Okay.
While we wait on that, it'll be fine.
Okay, sure. So the second thing we want to talk about is what some of the leading practices and lessons learned in evaluating a new ERP system. Again, most of these are not in a real particular order, although the first one here, the change management, is put up front for a reason. It's really important for customers to understand the undertaking that a new ERP system is going to entail. It's going to touch every part of your business, and getting change management in front of this process really pays benefits throughout the implementation, throughout the selection process, ultimately the implementation, and then post-implementation, getting everyone on board, what's actually happening, what to expect. You know, change is huge for people. They hear automation, am I losing my job? Those types of things need to be addressed ahead of time to kind of ease the nerves of what's going to happen. So it's really important to do that. And so we recommend don't forgetting that, not to forget that, and to address that early. Another one would be don't assume that you need a new ERP system. I know I just spent 15 minutes talking about the different ways that companies or reasons that they are looking for new ERP, but don't always assume you really need that. If you take a look at your current system, we typically do, unless it's just 100% clear you need a new system, it's just nothing is really a fit with what you currently have. We do say maybe it's worth taking 2 to 4 weeks of an assessment of your current system and bounce that up against what the capabilities are that are available and what you're actually have enabled and taking advantage of. And in that gap, would that fix many of your challenges today? And so that's sometimes worth taking that approach just to look and make sure we can't keep our current system at least for a little bit longer. And again, some of the drivers would dictate whether that's needed or not. Don't forget about your incumbent vendor. You've been with them for 15, 20 years. They have new offerings now, and you may not be aware of those. Their cloud offering may be just exactly what you need. It might provide an easier way to upgrade or implement or move to that new offering. And so you don't want to forget about that. They may also have purchased other software packages that fill the hole or the gap that you had in the software before, and you weren't aware of that. So don't automatically forget about them and just completely look at something new. The next one, a demonstration script. We always want to do that. I think that's pretty standard to see what the software can actually do, and that would be a true demonstration. We want to see exactly what they can do. We call it a day in the life. You do a day in the life of a kind of end-to-end process of a couple of scenarios that you would like to see, whether that's a requisition to paying the supplier, kind of rec to check. Maybe that's putting in an order to receiving the cash, whatever that particular process might be, hire to retire. You want to see what that actually looks like from the beginning to the end. You want to see data entered. You want to see data move from one area to another. How does the data flow? How can I report on it? When can I report on it? What are the different statuses? How does it all work together? You don't want them just to tell you, obviously, that these things work. And you don't want to see screenshots on the presentation that, yes, it works. We want to see it all the way through. We also suggest giving the same demonstration script to the 3 or 4 vendors that ultimately would provide a demonstration. You'll be able to compare apples to apples, how they put in a purchase order, how they hire a person, how they put in a customer. What does that look like? What works best for us? Which ones are flexible? Which ones are rigid? It gives you a good understanding of how things are actually going to work when you get there. So really just being focused on the business process. Do they have delivered or standard processes that they try to make you use? May be great. They do try to base them off best practices, but does that fit your process, fit your business? What can be modified, configured, those types of things. So those are some of the things we look at there. Also, we want to consider multiple criteria when evaluating the vendors. And we want to weight them accordingly. And the weightings and the criteria can change and are a little bit different for every customer, but I think there are some standard ones that would be applicable to everyone. But not everything's going to be weighted the same. You want to look at the alignment of this vendor with your company goals. Does it really fit the objectives of your company? If the next 3 to 5 years you're looking to go internationally, but that software doesn't support multiple currencies, or it doesn't support local GAAP, it only supports one type of accounting principle, it's probably not a good fit for you. You want to look at those things. What about your IT strategy? Are you a cloud shop? Are you going to the cloud? Are we in the process of going to the cloud? The software vendor only has an on-premise offering. That's not going to work for you. So you want to get some of those things out in the open. Of course, cost is always a big one. Not only if you are getting a cloud offering, not what is the yearly subscription price, but what are the implementation costs? What do I need from a support perspective, internally, externally, once I go live? What does that look like? Demonstration, we talked about that. You want to consider what the demonstration looks like. How easy is it to use? How flexible is it? So those are some things. Of course, references. The software vendors are going to provide references. They're of course only going to provide good references. So if you can look to some of your peers, talk to your CFO, your CEO, CIO, talk to them. They know their peers in the industry, see what they've put in, maybe why they they did not do something, or if they did, what were some of the things that worked, some of the lessons learned. Get some of those feedback on your own always is much more beneficial to what you're looking for. And of course, the capabilities. What can it do and what can it not do? What would we have to supplement with either another piece of software to fill that gap that software, the current ERP software, cannot do? And then we want to set realistic expectations. When you talk to the salespeople, they're going to come in and say, okay, it takes 3 to 6 months. And I'm not saying that they're not telling you something that hasn't happened in the past, but everyone's a little bit different. How complex are you? You need to kind of take that into consideration and really set some realistic expectations on what this process is going to take. And people that have been through this can help you through that. And then we don't want to forget the preparation of the new system. There's time to review and possibly redesign your business processes. You want to take advantage of this time to really analyze what you do today, what the pain points are, what works well, what we could change, and document some of those things. This is the time to do that. Also in preparation is data cleanup. If you have a system for 10, 15, 20 years, there's a lot of data in there. Data has changed over time, meaning you're using different fields in a different capacity than what was used 10 years ago. And so you have multiple types of data in the same fields or the same records. And this is the time to really start analyzing what's really necessary, what do we need, and start to clean up some of that data. Of course, talking about conversion, what strategy would be utilized? What are we bringing over? How much data? Should the data be saved somewhere else? Does it really have to come into the new ERP? Trying to understand what the requirements are around conversion. Those are all things that can be done before you ever start the selection process. It's just getting prepared for those for this project. The customer or the vendors are going to ask these questions, so you might as well get in front of it. And when you have the time, once you engage them, things start to move pretty quickly, and so you can get ahead of all of those things. And then you want to look at all the systems that maybe, if we're looking at a finance system, finance ERP, what all systems are feeding us financial data? Are those systems candidates to be replaced by an ERP? Let's start looking at those. Let's review those. Let's see exactly what those systems do. Let's document that and see if an ERP can maybe help us eliminate a system. This is the time to do those types of things. And then, of course, a big one, again, I kind of work a lot in the finance side. What are my chart of accounts? What dimensions do I need? Again, as you move through time, sometimes you want to look at data a little bit differently. I want to see things by location now. I didn't have product before. Now I want to see product. We do a lot of project work. What do my projects look like? My accounts, cost centers, all of those are prime time to relook at all of that and bounce that up against where you want to go. And of course, starting with the types of reports that you want to get out and make sure that the current code block is going to support that. So those are all really good things that you can do ahead of time to prepare yourself for this big project. Some other things we can do or lessons learned for us is to make sure that the scope is clearly defined. We've gone through a handful of different projects where scope has changed throughout as different things come up, and organizations change, and you can't really stop that, but trying to ensure that the scope of what you're trying to accomplish is very clear to the vendor and very clear to your organization. That way, the best solution can be identified and the vendors can provide the best solution possible. Most vendors have multiple offerings that they can provide to you, and they can put their best software forward for you. And clearly define those roles and responsibilities. Big ones are who's doing training, who's doing conversion. Those types of things all really affect the timeline that they're going to propose, the implementation costs that they're going to propose, So being clear on those types of things is something we found has been very beneficial to have. And then managing the ERP vendors. The vendors, of course, are going to want to control the process. They're going to want to do things on their timeline. They're going to want to show you what they want to show. They're going to want to talk to whoever they want to talk to, usually the executives. You want to make sure you have somebody that has some experience managing these vendors and a selection process. The sales teams are going to want to put their best foot forward, and you as the customer want their best foot forward. You want to see everything they can do that pertains to what you need. You want to see all of that. And so providing a process and the rigor to that so that you can evaluate every software the same provides really the best way of selecting the software, as opposed to letting each vendor kind of dictate what they can show and how you talk to them. It really helps with that. And some of the options you have to mitigate some of that and keep it very distinct and structured is to make sure that the vendors understand what your business needs are. Communicate with them, communicate early and often with them, keep them in the loop so they feel like, okay, we're in the process. We're not quite controlling it, but we're in it. We know every step that's going on. Set up some meetings with the key stakeholders. They're going to want to have that interaction, but make it scheduled time and not just having them call whenever they want, which really leads me here to the next point, which is we typically find hiring an ERP consultant, an independent one, that doesn't have any biases towards software vendors, can be an advocate for you, and can be that person that goes between the software vendors and your executive team to kind of shield all of the sales things that are going to be going on. Much easier for the consultant to stand firm on the process, the timelines, the communications all coming from one person or a group of people, depending on how large a project is. And it just makes it that much easier for the vendors. They appreciate that. And very helpful to your team, your executive team, and keeps everything kind of on track. And then it's very helpful after the selection to keep that person on, maybe to manage the project, to keep the vendors honest in what they committed to, and also provides the bridge from what was contracted or selected, what we thought we were getting, and what's being implemented. So they have the knowledge of being there during the selection process, and then go forward if you don't have the bandwidth to manage that yourself. Seen it both ways, works fine both ways as long as the person has the experience going through that. Okay, which leads to our next question. Is your company committed to the additional time, money, resources needed for change management? Looks like this is a really easy one, yes or no. But I think what we're trying to ask here is really going back to that change management. Do you believe change management is an important key part of this entire process? It's gonna cost some time, some money, some resources need to be committed to this. And is that something that is important to you, or you find we're not that big of an organization, not a big deal, or we can handle this the way we've always handled it, not a big deal? So again, just looking for a little bit of feedback there to see how you guys are thinking. Just a second. Oh, done. Okay. Oh, looks like 3/4 say yes. Great. Okay, so our last one, there we go. Our last area we want to review are, okay, you've decided, you've gone through this process of how we want to evaluate. We've talked about some of the major reasons. So now we're getting to what is the exact process of how we would select. So the first thing, it's somewhat redundant, but if you're going to select, we need to really understand what those reasons are. Why do you really need the ERP system? When we talked about that before, some of those things were software limitations. We've outgrown the current system, but it's really important for your leadership to understand the extent of the issues and how a new system would relieve those challenges and bring those efficiencies. So to be able to document, articulate those, and where you plan to be with the new software and how that would change the challenges that you have today is something that you want to document. Second, a business case needs to be created. What are our long-term goals? What's realistic to expect from the new software? What's the ballpark cost? You're not going to get the dialed in cost until you go through the process, but what are we looking at from a cost perspective? What can be eliminated? There's going to be some systems, I think, that most of the times can be eliminated. They can be brought into the ERP system. Does it support your 3 to 5 year plan? Your growth? Do you plan, again, to extend to other countries? What does that look like? Not all systems can support that. Maybe there's regulatory requirements. Not all systems support those. So to document some of those long-term goals and where you're going and how this software, with new software, would help support and drive some of that growth where your current system just can't do that. So really explaining those specific ways that the ERP will change the way your business operates and how the ERP will help you stay competitive with your customers, or sorry, with your competitors. Executives will be more likely to invest when they see those particular items documented and talked through. You want to leverage, in that business case, you want to leverage your employees to provide some of those challenges. There's many advantages to leveraging your employees there. First, it gives them the opportunity to have some say in the process. They get buy-in to the process. They're ultimately, most of those, as we'll see here in just a minute, when you build your team, they're going to be on the evaluation. They may even be in the selection process and ultimately on the implementation. So getting them up front in the process really gets them engaged in the project. And change is hard, but if they're up front, they're a little bit more willing to have that change because they've seen where they are and they've seen the vision of where they're going. And then some big ones, and this is kind of in preparation, kind of like we talked about before, is determining your IT strategy. What's your infrastructure strategy? Are you a cloud shop? Are you more on-premise? We like to own everything. What's the rest of your organization doing? Are you going towards the cloud? So we want the software to be there. What about your overall system methodology? Do you look for a best of breed? So we want the best of everything. We want the best travel expense software, so we get Concur. We want the best CRM sales software, so we get Salesforce. So whatever those might be, we just like to get the best of everything. And then behind the scenes, we try to ensure that everything is talking to each other and data is flowing properly. Or we're looking for an all-in-one, kind of that ERP that does basically everything. And we want as much as we can in there. Or the third one, which we typically see, is more of a hybrid, where you're trying to get at least 80% of your processes in one system, your ERP, and then that 20%, 10%, 15%, whatever is palatable for you, we get the other systems to fill in those gaps. And so what is your strategy there? Those are things you want to know up front, because when you go to evaluate the proposals that come back, they're going to tell you what they can and can't do. And you're going to see there's going to be some gaps. And how do you want to deal with that? Do we change our process? Do we purchase new software? What should we do? What's your reporting strategy? Where do we get our data? What systems are going to be feeding data? Do we do a data warehouse? Do we have systems that sit on top that can pull from multiple sources, Power BI, Oracle Analytics, whatever it may be? What's our strategy there? What are we intending to do? And some of those things might change as you learn what's out there, but it's good to have an idea of where you want to go from an organization standpoint. Resource strategy, how are we going to staff this project? We've got the selection project, we've got the implementation project coming up. Do we have a good mix of employees and contractors? Is it all employees? Is it 90% contractors? What are we going to do there? How are we going to staff this? Customization strategy is always a big one. What are we going to do that's outside of the delivered structure or processes that the system is delivering? Again, they try to build those on best practices. Those don't always work for you, but what are you going to do when they don't work? Or are you going to address your business process and say, do we really need to do that? That was one of the earlier points. Is that something we need to bring forward, or are we good to change and take a look at what else is out there? Determining your data management strategy. Data governance is a really huge one. How much data will we migrate? When data is entered into the system, what is the data entry point? Is it into the ERP? Is it into a different system? How does data flow? Who owns the data? Those are all really big things of how systems talk to each other and who controls it, so that there's not duplication of data. Data doesn't get out of sync between systems, and how much data should be converted. There's a lot of different things around data management that could be addressed and should be addressed. Again, all of this could be done just prior to doing your selection process, or as the very first steps of your selection process. Okay, so now we're getting more into the actual project itself. We've kind of put all these things together. We kind of know what we want to do. We want to organize our project. So we're going to build our selection team. We recommend having your subject matter experts from all different parts of your business, whether it's departments, business units, locations, whatever gives you a good cross section of what you do, why you do it, and how you do it. You want to have representation. And there's different hierarchies that you can have that can be implemented, but to have that representation across, it's really hard for one or two people to understand all the ins and outs of your business and all the little nuances that I didn't know that so-and-so had to take an Excel file and send it over to someone else, run this macro. I just thought it was one input and it was there. You need to get some of those subject matter experts in there so they understand not only what they have to do, but what was before them and then what's downstream, to get that full view. And again, like we stated before, it provides user buy-in, that they're participating in, okay, we're trying to solve my problems. We're trying to solve my business unit's problems. So let's give them all the things we want to have fixed, and want to make sure that the things that are working well, we can't live without, are also documented. It's not always a negative thing. We've got positive things we want to keep, and then we've got things we want to fix. We talked a little bit about this, but a project manager or a project leader that has experience going through this, there's hundreds of ERP vendors, to be honest with you, that really look to different levels of business, whether it's based on revenue, small, medium, large types of companies. There's different software that will support or focus on those different levels. And so there's so many things out there. How do you stay on top of that? And how do you understand what some of their pros and cons are, and what they do well and what they don't do at all? How long have they been around? Those types of questions, you want some help with that with somebody with experience. All these software are going to do something similar. If you're looking at the finance, you're going to be able to pay your invoices when the supplier sends you an invoice. You'll probably be able to create a PO. Those types of things are just standard things, but you have differentiating requirements that need to be addressed, and you can knock out some of these vendors just right off the bat knowing they don't do it. And of course, an easy one is always the international. Not all companies are looking to be international. They just want to be in the US, or they just want to be in Canada or Mexico, whatever it may be, that's their niche. And then you want to create that selection criteria. Again, we talked about that: industry, experience, cost, demonstration, capabilities, whatever those may be. You want to get those established. And then the change management, we'll want to establish the change management at this time. We talked about the benefits of that being done up front. So we want to make sure that we do that. And then determining your business requirements. There's high-level business process review that we would typically go through to understand what are we talking about, what do we want to put into our ERP, what's really in scope. We talked about nailing down the scope, being specific. That's where this comes in. We want the high-level business process review. We want to know what's going to be evaluated as far as other ancillary systems. So again, you might have all these different systems feeding in. Are they candidates for this ERP selection project? Are those business processes we're going to include? And then there's the differentiating ones. Do you have the international? Do you have regulatory things that you do? Maybe in the telecoms side of things, maybe in financial services. There's a lot of different regulatory things that have to be accounted for, and do these systems cater to that, or they don't really do that? So you want to identify all of those types of things, which then leads to building a decent sized list of ERP candidates and going through some of those criteria and matching those up, and then they get kicked out right away, and you'll be left with a shorter list of ERP systems that you'll want to send an RFI or an RFP out to them. And those vendors can be whittled down to a shorter list by giving them a call. We typically call the vendors and say, hey, here's the top 10 things we're kind of looking for. Is this something you guys do well or not? We know you do certain things well. We're looking at a cost range. Does it fit that for this number of users? And so you kind of whittle the vendors down. So now we're going to create an RFI process that delivers the proposal and has all of those key things in there. It has your timeline of when you're trying to make the selection. It has the requirements, the differentiating ones, the overall kind of basic requirements. All of those are going to be in there, which then they're going to respond to that proposal, and you're going to evaluate those proposals and provide what we typically do is a summary side-by-side evaluation so that you can see things lined up. You can see what their implementation approach and timeline would be. You can see what their costs would be. You can highlight capabilities that they do and don't do, and where their cloud software is maintained in the US, internationally, what parts of the US, wherever you're interested in, those key things would be summarized so that you don't have to read a 30-page proposal. We've boiled it down to the key factors. To, again, we're looking to go from maybe 7 to 10 vendors you've sent out a proposal to 3 or 4 on a demonstration that we would invite to a demonstration. And we talked about the demonstration script and how important that is in order to evaluate side by side, apples to apples, of what the software can and can't do. And so we provide that script to them. They'll come in, depending on how much you're doing. They can be a couple of days, could be one day, depending on what all you want to see. And it's always a good idea to give them 30 minutes, give them an hour that's unscripted for them to show you all the things that they could do that you didn't ask about. Maybe there's machine learning, maybe there's artificial intelligence, all these new things that come out that are changing all of the time that would really show you where they're going with their R&D, what you could maybe potentially use in the future, gives them an idea, gives them some time to show off what they can do. And then we would go through scoring. We take all of the factors that we wanted to evaluate, the criteria, we weighted it, we scored it, and now we have a summary score at the end that kind of tells us which one potentially works best for us. Some are going to be pretty close, and there'll be some deciding factors where the selection group is going to have to hash out some of those things. And then you'll go into negotiating with the vendor that's selected. Like, again, an independent consultant here helps if they have the negotiating experience. There's some nuances to negotiating with the ERP vendors. Of course, they can help get the best price, which is why you would hire them, but it also helps understand what you're getting into from a contract SOW perspective if you're not used to using being with the cloud type contracts. Okay, to whip through that since we're at the end here. The last polling question here is number 4, and that is, in the past, what was the main reason your selection and implementation was not as successful as it could have been? And so we have 4 different things there for you to select. Not enough planning and resources dedicated, requirements gathering was not done properly, too much internal bias towards one vendor, or the selection and implementation was very successful. So we'll give you just a couple seconds there. And while that's going, I know we're getting here to the end, but we went through a lot of different things. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can, but we found that these steps have worked for our customers in evaluating and ultimately selecting their new ERP. Again, there's so many ERPs out there. We've tried to provide a structure to make that decision, that it's an educated decision, that it's not so much subjective. You've got some real data points that you've evaluated. There's always some subjectivity in there, and that's great, but you don't want it to all be subjective. So we've tried to provide that kind of the right level of detail, some of the rigor that we can provide. And not all those steps have to be done. We do tailor it to different customers, but hopefully the result is that you select the right software, you're happy with it, and you maximize your return on your investment. So that's it for me. I think at this time, we would take some questions. And we did get the results. Yeah, go for it. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and just interesting to see the results of that poll too. It's pretty evenly spread. It's interesting. We do have a question about what are your thoughts on a mid-year cutoff versus an end of year?
Yeah, good question. I think definitely we suggest, and when you say end of year, we're talking fiscal year. And if we're talking about financial system, I'll say that we definitely prefer to do the fiscal year cutoff for the various obvious reasons of not having mid-year conversions, of trying to get let's say the first 6 months into the new format and converting all of that. And then so you can have a full year of financials. That's typically what we would do, but we have done, when we did implementations, we've done many implementations that were mid-year. But if it was something you could wait for and work it into the end of the fiscal year, that is definitely preferable on many levels.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. And I just had a quick question on, what do you see on average, how long companies spend on the selection process? I'm sure it's a big range, but I'm just curious what you've seen.
Well, what we do, I'll just break it down into just big chunks. Getting the requirements, depending on how large the company is, might take a couple of weeks, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, to get the high level processes that would be involved, to get the differentiating requirements, to get the overall basic requirements takes 2 to 3 weeks. Depending on how many systems you have that you're wanting to see or would be candidates to be replaced with the ERP, that could take another week to document those. So maybe 3 to 4 weeks to get the requirements. Then we start talking to, based off those types of requirements, what ERPs would be candidates for the selection process. And that can take a week or 2 to call different vendors, start doing the research based on that company, what would really work there, start talking to the vendors, and creating the RFI. That's another 2 to 3 weeks. Then you have to give the vendor 2 to 3 weeks to respond. if you have 3 or 4 vendors, then it's a 2 to 3 week process for them to come in and demonstrate. Typically, they're going to want probably a couple of days, depending on how large the demonstration is. So we've seen 12 to 20 weeks, I'm going to say, as a range to get those done.
Okay, great. And our last question, Jeff,
Yes.
How do you address retired systems, data storage, and retrieval issues?
Let me
So
think about that. Let me make sure I understand the question. Are you talking about if the system's been retired, the data that would not be converted to the new system? What do you do with that data?
yeah, this question is from my friend Steve Patterson. So you might clarify in the chat there, Stephen, but I'm thinking you're saying maybe after you go live on your new system, your old system, I guess, how long do you keep it around to retrieve data and store data in that old system?
Yeah, so the time frame is usually dictated by the company needs and some of the regulatory things. If you're publicly traded, there's certain things that you need to have access to. A lot of times, the things that are regulatory related, those typically get converted. But if we decide we're changing so much that we won't convert all of that, and we don't really need it except every once in a while on an ad hoc basis, then we typically look at multiple solutions to put that data. Sometimes people, if they own the software that they're in, they just kind of keep an instance over there that people can access on a read-only basis so that they can't change data. Sometimes there's databases that they'll move data into, the key information. So there's a little bit of a conversion there. There's multiple ways of doing it, and we do address that on a case-by-case basis because everyone is a little bit different on what their needs are, how long you would have to keep that data, what the complexity is to convert it into the new system, and why you wouldn't do that. So those are things we just work through during the project. I don't have a specific answer for all of those.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. And for everybody, Jeff's email is right there up on the screen. If you think of another question, feel free to email him. And we're right here on the hour at 1 o'clock. So I guess we will see you next time, hopefully, on our next webinar. And appreciate your presentation, Jeff, and appreciate everybody's time to join us. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.